Hi, welcome to this webinar about breaking conventions with low-code for core business software. My name is Canisius, CEO at USoft. Before we start, we very much appreciate 30 minutes of your time today, and we're looking forward to going through this webinar. During this webinar, it's possible to pose questions, which you can do in the chat, and we will try to cover the questions during this webinar. If we are unable to cover your question, don't worry, we will make sure to circle back to you after this webinar. In addition, this session is taped, and we will make sure to share a recording with you as well following this webinar. This webinar today is about breaking conventions with low-code for core business software. It will take about 30 minutes, and like I said before, we very much appreciate your time. Now, some of you might be familiar with low-code, and some of you might not, and that's okay. What we've done for this webinar is that we will begin with today's challenges in digital transformation, followed by a brief guide in how you can orient towards selecting technology when you are considering new technology to help you in your digital transformation challenges. Following this, we will look into some of the conventions of low-code that we often encounter when we talk to organizations that orient themselves towards adopting low-code technology. And finally, we will conclude with a very brief summary of what USoft does as a low-code provider specifically designed for core business software, and how we facilitate organizations in their complex digital transformation challenges when it comes to core processes. So, with that said, let's start with the webinar, and a good place to start is with today's challenges in digital transformation. When we look at what's going on today, it's what we often call the USoft, the Act Now economy, is that organizations are increasingly pushed to transform their business and to adopt to new customer demands. So a key example that we often use in this sense is, for instance, how we used to order our new products online, and we expected that things would be there in 2 to 3 days. And today we live in an economy where we expect something to be delivered today, but no later than tomorrow, or even the day after, is exceeding or it's not fulfilling our customer expectations. Now, what's important to stress here is what we see is that some of the leading organizations in the world are changing consumer behavior, and these leaders in digital transformation basically set the benchmark for every other organization within the industry. And the interesting thing is that what we are used to as consumers is something that we take with us to work. So it's not just a business to consumer change of expectations, but it's something that we take with us to our work and that we expect within our organization and the other organizations that we work with. And as a result, organizations are increasingly pushed to keep up with everything that the digital world has to offer and to transform their business time and time again. And if we look at the primary stress points that organizations face within this Act Now economy, you can basically summarize them in 3 key parts. The one is that organizations need to become increasingly more agile, meaning that they are able to adjust their processes quickly and to adjust to new customer demands. In addition to that, this revolves around the fact that as an organization, your time to market of new services and product needs to be shortened. And this means that your IT environment has to have a short time to market as well. And finally, and basically this goes for every organization, there's an increasingly push to improve efficiency and continuity of your organization. And as we said before, the benchmark is set by some of the leading organizations in the world. And the fact that consumers and we as workers take these expectations with us to our work only increases the barriers that we have to push to as organizations. Now, in addition to these challenges, we did a research among 500 business and IT managers in the Netherlands. And there were a lot of interesting findings. But one of the things that really dominated the research was that there was a large portion of the respondents that agreed on 3 specific themes within the research questions that we posed. And one is that business teams are looking for ways to really increase innovation and speed, but that they are hindered by core systems. On the other hand, their IT counterparts want to move faster as well, but their budget and time is often consumed for a large portion, even up to 80% or above, by basically keeping the lights on, maintaining their existing IT landscape and systems. And so their core challenge is how they can improve efficiency to have more time and budget available for innovation and new developments. And finally, something that we hear quite a lot still and has been a topic for over decades is how can we close the gap between business and IT? So how can we facilitate both parties to understand each other better in order to improve creativity and effectiveness and to make sure that the solutions developed continuously align with the business needs that we have? And in addition to these challenges, we see something very interesting in the last couple of years. So where digital transformation in the past 10, 15 years has primarily focused on sort of the periphery of core business processes, we now see that with these increasing developments, organizations have to increasingly focus on changing and adapting their core business processes and thus also their core business systems. And as a result, digital transformation is really moving into the sphere of your primary business process, and just keeping up with the basics is no longer enough. So organizations are increasingly pushed to really take up the next challenge in terms of digitizing their core business processes and the underlying IT systems. And in addition to this, there are significant frontiers to tackle. So for instance, if we look at the technology domain, artificial intelligence is booming in combination with hyper-automation, basically the trend to continuously automate manual activities in an advanced manner to make sure that the number of people that you need for a specific process is reduced. And from a technology perspective, we see that organizations, especially some in heavy industries and for instance, financial services, increasingly face the challenges of legacy IT. So old systems that are running core processes that just can simply no longer keep up with what organizations need. And what hasn't changed, but has increasingly got some focus, is that business complexity, data quality, and scalability of the solutions that we use are fundamentally important and become even more important as we move into this domain where we tackle and digitize our core business processes even further than we have done so far. And an additional element which is coming up recently, and rightfully so, is the element of sustainability. So how can we make sure that developing software solutions is faster and consumes less resources, running the software is more energy efficient, but also storing data and processing data is more efficient? So one of the latest research in this domain indicates that about 80% of the data that organizations store isn't used at all anymore. So that means that just a portion of the data that we store is effectively used as part of our processes. And how can we increase the effective storage and use of data without having these bulk of data building up in, for instance, server parks, which is not used by the organization? So in addition to this pressure on core system digitization, organizations need to consider how to tackle these specific frontiers as well. And that poses a challenge. How do you find the right technology? We firmly believe at USoft that there is no silver bullet. So as an organization, you cannot spend enough time on really assessing what your problem is and how you can find the right technology. And we would briefly like to go through some of the crucial steps that we think you should take into consideration. So let's look at the options. Often when people think about buying new software or looking for new software, there are two directions that they primarily think in. So one is off the shelf, for instance, a prepaid made solution that you can just configure and use, for instance, a finance system or some HR system or even an ERP. And the other option is often referred as we have to build something ourselves. And most people still think of high coding, so programming. But there's an intermediate form. And this is what low code is. So if you look at commercial off the shelf, it's basically a pre-built package that you can use and sometimes tailor to what you need to some extent. And custom coding allows you to do everything from scratch, but it's time consuming and is a real IT thing. Low code is a technology that has been around for quite some time and is a perfect hybrid form between these two variables. And the basic underlying assumption with low code platforms or low code technology is that they take away a lot of the custom programming, which is automated by the platform. And in addition to that, they allow development to be faster by using, for instance, visual models and pre-built components. So it's a hybrid form between components that you have, for instance, comparable to off the shelf, but with the flexibility to customize and tailor everything to your specific needs. Now, it's important to stress, and I will circle back a little bit towards the 3 different options later on. It's important to stress that we, in the past 10 years, we have seen quite a dramatic rise in terms of the popularity of low-code technology. And that's for a couple of reasons. So for one, because it uses visual modeling and a lot of the programming is automated by the platform, it's much more business user focused and provides a lot more options to integrate neatly with business processes. In addition to that, the development speed is faster and it enhances productivity because IT resources from various backgrounds can work in these types of technology, but it's also easier to involve business counterparts as well. And in addition to this, as a result, the solutions that you create are in general more easy to use, flexible to change, and easier to maintain compared to, for instance, complex custom programmed applications. Finally, resulting in a cost efficiency for the organization. But like I said before, there is no silver bullet. So depending on the challenge that you have, you need to look at specific type of technologies. So let's look, for instance, at commercial off-the-shelf. The very powerful strength about commercial off-the-shelf solutions is that they are often based on tried and tested standards. For instance, a finance package. There is virtually no reason to build a finance package completely from scratch because many of the finance practices have been tried and tested 1,000 times over. The only downfall with commercial off-the-shelf is that there's a pitfall of customization. So what organizations and especially larger corporations have experienced in the past 15 years is that, for instance, within the ERP domain, many of the ERP packages have been customized to a greater extent, with as a result, the organization losing all the benefits of commercial off-the-shelf and having to deal with a sort of rigid, inflexible system that is expensive to maintain. So commercial off-the-shelf is very good as long as you keep to the tried and tested standards. On the other hand, custom programming provides some other benefits as well. It's very flexible and something that is often referred to as no vendor lock-in. For some organizations, it's very appealing to look towards high programming. But the downfall is that we live in an era where resources are increasingly scarce. And one of the key pitfalls when it comes to high coding, for instance, custom programming in Java, is that there's an increasing risk of resource and knowledge lock-in. So it's very difficult to transfer knowledge from one to the other, and especially because business involvement is less efficient compared to the other options. And as a result, the resource lock-in and the risk of ending up with a solution that is difficult to maintain is something to take into close consideration. And as mentioned before, low-code provides a very powerful hybrid alternative. It provides you with the flexibility that high-code provides, but it also provides you with some of the tried and tested standards that low-code or that custom commercial off-the-shelf provide. However, there are some interesting conventions surrounding low-code, and this is the topic of the third part of today's webinar that are important to discuss with you as well. But when we are looking at these three different options, we at USoft always think that it's very important to focus as an organization on those areas where you can digitally make a difference. So for instance, if you are challenged by your finance domain and you need to find a new solution, then we often opt to really look at the standard solutions available in the market. So for all those business processes within your organization that are 1,000 times over at your competitors and other organizations, you shouldn't have any doubt in mind and primarily orient yourself towards commercial off-the-shelf. Because with those solutions, you can implement quickly if you keep to the tried and tested standards and focus on the processes within your organization that make a difference and really add the value. So if you look at your processes and the business value that you create, we believe that standard, or we believe that if you look at these processes, that when the degree of the uniqueness of these processes and the competitive power for your organization increases, that you are then moving into a domain where you can use technology to really make a difference and stand out compared to your competitors. And this is also the domain which is difficult to include in commercial off the shelf. And it is within these processes that you can add competitive advantage and that you can build a difference or differentiating capability compared to your competitor. And where commercial off the shelf doesn't really fit. So as a sort of practical guideline, what we often discuss with organizations that are orienting themselves towards technology is take a look at the challenge. What is the business process, or what are the processes that you need to digitize? And do these fit well within commercial off the shelf, for instance, an above 90% fit rate? Or is there a difference? And is there a sort of strong case to start with commercial off the shelf and add additional intelligence with, for instance, a low-code platform? And in some cases, and especially in industries that are highly revolved around specific and unique processes, we see cases where commercial off the shelf doesn't fit at all, and you always need to look towards a custom system to really stand out. And this is where low-code provides a very good alternative compared to high coding, because you can work with the same resources, but more involved with the business and a lot easier to maintain. So as a practical guideline for when you're orienting towards technology solutions, try to map your processes against the uniqueness and the competitive power that they yield for your organization. And the more they move towards standard, try to see if you can find standard solutions. And if this is not the case, if you've got specific requirements, try to find the right solution for you in terms of either combining technologies or selecting a specific technology that can help you stand out. So with this said, let's move to some of the conventions that we often encounter when we are talking to organizations that orient themselves towards low-code. And this is fairly interesting because there are some very powerful conventions that we face almost daily. And I think very important to tackle, especially in reflection to the previous slides in terms of orienting yourself towards future technology solutions. Because what if low-code could actually be used for any type of challenge that you have within your organization, even the most complex and unique challenges that you face within your specific processes? So let's move to convention number 1. And this one is some that we've often heard. And I think for the people that are familiar with low-code, they might as well. And the convention is that low-code is not for mission-critical applications. So the underlying assumption with this convention is that low-code technology or no-code, which is a sort of substream of low-code that is oriented towards business users developing their own application without the need of any IT. So the substream of this assumption is that the low-code and no-code technology is primarily for simple applications that bring some information to the end user. So what we are going to do with each of these conventions is to look at one or two customer cases that demonstrate that this convention doesn't necessarily have to be true. So the first one that we want to touch upon for convention number 1 is, for instance, the Dutch government. And for over 25 years, a large portion of the Dutch subsidy programs that we run for private citizens as well as for organizations has been running on a low-code platform. So in this specific case, we are talking about approximately 700 subsidy regulations with, in the meantime, over 1.3 billion in subsidies being distributed through the platform, and with a typical go-live time for new regulations between 1 to 2 weeks. And this is actually quite impressive. It's a very solid case management system in operations for over 25 years. And deals with everything from acquiring a subsidy to subsidy scoring and judgment, and to the entire financial cycle of payment, and finally closing a subsidy program for a specific citizen or organization. And typically, a core system like this is not associated with low-code, but definitely something that is capable with the right type of low-code platform. And as you can see, already in operations for 25 years. Another key example in this core domain is, for instance, one of the cases in a global energy conglomerate. So this is a manufacturer of complex plants used in the oil and gas industry. And what this organization does is that they design, they build, and they maintain these complex plants, these highly industrial installations. So, and the key thing here is that over 30 years ago, they started to develop the system in-house using a low-code platform. And if you look at today, the system is used for over 30 years by 2,500 daily users. And the very interesting case here, and this goes back to one of the benefits of low-code that we've touched upon before, the maintainability and the total cost of ownership, is that this organization uses a low-code product, but it also uses a commercial off the shelf. And what we experience here is that the low-code maintenance team is about 3 FTE, whereas the commercial off the shelf maintenance team is about 10 to 15 FTE. So this is a huge difference in terms of maintenance cost and sustainability in terms of performance, as well as what resources are required to maintain the solution compared to commercial off the shelf. And the reason for this is that the commercial off the shelf has a lot of customizations over time, which are very difficult to maintain and therefore provide a very different cost case. So again, a good case to demonstrate that the convention that low-code is not for core systems isn't necessarily true. So let's move on to convention number 2. Low-code limits the possibilities for unique and complex requirements. And this is a convention that we often hear as well. And in some cases, this is definitely true. So for instance, if you look at the various technologies that you can select within the low-code domain, there are definitely platforms that are more oriented towards simple and end-user applications. And so, for instance, if you look at Power Apps platform, you can quickly build applications, but it's difficult to include very complex and very unique processing within such applications. But this doesn't mean that low-code technology cannot deal with very unique and complex requirements. It's just a matter of, are you selecting the right technology? The same as we expressed in section number 2 of this presentation. Look at your challenges and find the right technology. So there's one specific case that I'd like to bring in with regards to this convention that really demonstrates that low-code technology can actually deal with very unique and complex requirements. And this is a case that revolves around device integration and advanced AI integration. So one of the things that is currently quite booming within the life sciences sector is oriented towards, in this case, phenotyping, but it's a sort of lab automation process pushed towards streamlining the efficiency of research in order to, in this case, optimize plant growth, but this can also be for medicine development or other purposes in the life sciences sector. And what we did in this case is that we built a lab automation solution that integrates with various devices. So this, for instance, high resolution cameras and other lab equipment. And in addition to that, also integrates with a lot of AI pipelines, artificial intelligence algorithms that evaluate the photos being taken of, in this case, plants. And what this allows is that where in the past this used to be a manual process, within one single solution for one single lab, we can do over 30,000 samples per day, which is 10 times faster compared to what it was previously. Integrate seamlessly with the AI algorithms that are used to evaluate the research results. And it decreases error margins within the research process by 80%. And this is just for one single lab. And the interesting thing is that if you look at this solution in terms of integrating with AI and integrating one-on-one with the devices used in a laboratory, if you look at the convention that we are discussing now, this is typically something that from a low-code convention standpoint is often assumed not to be possible with low-code. But again, here the case is, are you selecting the right technology? So there are specific low-code platforms, of which USoft is one, that if you really want to have complex and unique requirements within your solution, think about AI and device integration in this case, then that is definitely possible within a low-code platform and still provides you the benefits in terms of speed and ease of maintenance and cost that low-code platforms provide. I see so far no questions coming in, but if you have these questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat, as mentioned before. So let's move on to convention number 3. Low-code is not for high performance and data-intensive processing. And again, there are specific platforms, particularly in the no-code domain, that if you really want to have high volumes of event data, for instance, or a lot of transactions within a system, that's difficult to realize with these type of solutions. But low-code technology, like for instance USoft, is specifically designed for high performance and data-intensive processing. And a key case to demonstrate this is, for instance, Schiphol Airport. So this is an organization with a very mature IT landscape and a lot of core systems. And their primary challenge was, how can we provide an intelligence layer on top of all these different systems that processes a lot of the events that are running through the airport on a day-to-day basis. So it has nothing to do with changing legacy systems or building core systems, but it was purely focused on how can we add additional cross-functional business logic on top of all the systems that we have, for instance, to connect our baggage process with our passenger process more neatly, or our passenger process with our flights process or asset utilization process. So one key example here, for instance, is that, and as a sort of case demonstration, if we look at Schiphol Airport, it's interesting that about 60 to 70% of the passengers transfer on Schiphol Airport. So they arrive, for instance, from overseas and transfer to a flight to another European airport. And if you look at these volumes, then for instance, an incoming flight can have 20 connections to outgoing flights. And before, this was unable to track. So both the airline and the airport were unable to see which of these connections were at risk of missing their flight. And what Schiphol built with the use of a low-code platform is an application that in real time tracks everything that is going on the airport to actively predict which of the connections are in the safe zone, which are in the danger zone, and which are no longer going to make their flight. And as a result, airport operations can, in advance, try to initiate mitigating actions in order to resolve potential disruptions and make sure that the number of passengers that make their connecting flight is optimized. So if we look at what Schiphol has built with low-code technology, it's basically a hyper-automation or a landscape of applications invisible to the user that apply this cross-functional business logic on top of the existing systems already used. And currently there are 18 applications running with over 2.5 million business events being processed per day, with over 80 interfaces with different applications, and with a typical time to market of new solutions between 12 to 24 months. And so if you look at this case, and if you look at the volume of information that is being processed on a day-to-day basis, this has, for many people that are somewhat familiar with low-code, always been an edge case of what is possible with this type of technology. And actually, it's well within reach. But the one platform is not really the other, like I mentioned before. So what you see, for instance, in this case, is that USoft being used for the very data-intensive and high-volume processing, and other low-code technology is used within the Schiphol Airport environment, for instance, for end-user involvement. Yeah. And I see that we are pretty short on time. So I will move on to convention number 4. Low-code is not equipped to build your sustainable competitive advantage. And this is a more abstract form, but basically is a summary of the previous 3 conventions. So the convention is, number 1 was not for core. Convention number 2 was it can't really deal with very complex requirements. And 3, it's difficult for high processing. Now, as the cases have demonstrated, the right type of technology actually can deal with all these challenges. And as a result, you can use low-code technology specifically for your competitive advantage. Grabbing back to one of the slides that we shared before, it's our firm belief that as an organization, you should focus your attention, so that means your resources and your time and money, on those processes where you can really make a difference. And they always revolve around your competitive advantage. So they are increasingly unique for you, and they boost value to your product or service that you deliver. And this is always what we stress. Select low code for where you really need to step up your digitization, and use commercial off the shelf for those cases that revolves around processes that are standard within the market. So again, as a sort of practical guide, what we often tell our clients is really look at the situation that you're dealing with and try to find the right spot of the technology combination or the technology that you need to use. So for instance, if it's very specific for you, make sure that it's under your control and 100% tailored to what you need, and either build it yourself or have a specialist build it for you. And low code offers some very powerful alternatives, or make a hybrid combination between a commercial off-the-shelf system with additional intelligence, or boost all your systems with additional intelligence, like the Schiphol case. And the importance that we want to stress is that if you want to differentiate as an organization, it's not about just the business being leading, or just about people building fast applications to support your business, but it's also about that techie being able to innovate your business process. And all these three stakeholders need to be facilitated in the right balance. And depending on the technology that you use, this balance can be a bit out of whack, which means that, for instance, you can build an application fast for your business, but it doesn't really include the intelligence that you need. Or you spend a lot of time on customizing systems, and eventually they provide a sort of rigidity which makes it impossible for your business to adapt their processes. So this is something really important to take into consideration. If you look at technology, how can you find a technology and a solution that really combines the primary interests of each of these stakeholders and supports the development process for the best solution for your business? Now, to summarize, I think in the last 2-3 minutes of this webinar, briefly touching upon USoft. As I mentioned before, USoft is a low-code platform specifically designed for business-critical and unique operations. So we always say, quite open and honestly, if you want to have like an application just extending some data to the user, that's not the type of application for us. But if you are orienting yourself towards low code, but also live with these conventions that we've covered in this presentation, then know that there is low code technology available within the market that can actually deal with these very complex environments. At USoft, we do this in this very specific manner. We are one of the only platforms that really uses business rules, which is fairly interesting because we use business rules, you always ensure that the solution that you develop is a digital twin of your business process. And a business rule, in essence, means that it's exactly what you think it is. So, for instance, a rule could be a customer needs to be 18 years of older. This is something that we one-on-one transfer into our software. And when we look at business rules, the interesting thing is that often organizations, both from a business perspective and from software perspective, think in processes and neglect or only briefly touch upon the business rules. And actually, these two coexist with each other. So a process always underlines a set of business rules that are fundamental to executing that process accordingly. So a process concerns the how of something. So how is something realized? So the order or the sequence of events that are running through your organization. Whereas a business rule expresses what needs to be done. So very specific conditions and criteria. That could be a calculation, or could be a criteria, could be a legal criteria or an organizational criteria. And to demonstrate this in a bit more detail, why using business rules is powerful in terms of software development is that over 30 years that USoft is now using business rules as a sort of center point in software development, is that we see that business rules are very specific. So like I mentioned before, a customer is 18 years or older is very specific. A calculation rule on how something must be calculated in terms of, for instance, pricing is also very specific. And the good thing is that a business rule is very easy to read and share. So it's in natural language, could be in English or Dutch or any language. And anyone in the business can validate this business rule, whether it's right or wrong. And what we also see is that they're very stable over time. So where a process often changes, a business rule often stays the same. And as you can see in the conceptual figure on the right, and this is actually how our technology works, what we do is that we center your data in the middle, like the Earth and the atmosphere, and we model your business rules as a sort of protective layer around your data, which means that you end up with a very stable solution, guaranteeing your data quality and consistency. And at the same time, it functions as a sort of digital twin of your business, because your business rules are encapsulated in the software and always make sure that it performs exactly as you have described your business process. I will skip this slide because of the time, but it's important to stress that everything that we do is 100% business focus, which means, like I said before, that the solutions that you get are a digital twin of the business process that you want to automate. And as a result, going back to one of the first slides, you actually see that, for instance, with USoft, the benefits of low-code are also available for the complex core system domain, making it possible to have your complex automation or your digitization challenges or your core system automation within a low-code platform and have these benefits of speed, business agility, productivity, and cost. And in addition to that, be guaranteed about the performance, the ease of maintenance, data quality and consistency, and bottom line, reduce total cost of ownership of your application. So to conclude with some of the key takeaways of today's webinar, like we said before, low-code is for mission critical applications. You can absolutely build your core applications with the right USoft or other low-code technology. There are vendors very specifically oriented towards quick and easy apps that bring data to the user, and there are low-code platforms very much specialized in complex core automation. And that means that low-code does have the possibility for unique and complex requirements. And especially with AI and hyper-automation being important trends, these are areas of development that core digitization challenges often revolve around and can definitely be solved with low-code technology. And thirdly, low-code is for high performance and data-intensive processing. And especially if data quality and consistency is important, but also if your business wants to continuously evolve your solution, the combination of the right type of technology, low-code technology, can really help you continuously build on top of your existing business processes and making sure that you keep moving with your customer and your partner demands. And finally, low-code is suitable to build your sustainable competitive advantage, but we always strongly stress to really look at the challenge that you have. So is your question standard? Look at commercial off the shelf. And the more unique and the more competitive your business process comes, look at either combining technologies or selecting the right type of low-code technology to digitize your business process and make sure that you have future-proof solutions. I see that we haven't received questions, considering the amount of information and the time, I can imagine. I see 2 questions coming in. We will make sure to circle back with the answers after this webinar. Like I said before, I'd really like to appreciate you for your time today. I hope this presentation was insightful. If there are any questions from your end after this presentation, don't hesitate to reach out, and we will definitely like to dive into some of the conventions in more detail. And of course, we hope to see you at our next webinar. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you again in the future. Enjoy your day.